it's psychology over physiology every single time. The psychology of the individual that's going into that show, that's been told by other bikini competitors or by other bodybuilders that it's going to be so much fun to eat this shit, and I get to post about it, and I get all this attention because of it, as opposed to, hey, I'm post show and I didn't need to binge and I didn't need to overeat. I was just able to go and celebrate the show with my family, my loved ones. We had a nice piece of meat. We were able to have some sushi. I was able to go to sleep that night, not have meat sweats, and everything is good. And now I get to walk through the next 3 months, get my hormones back in line, get my digestive health back in line. I only put on maybe a couple of pounds after the show instead of 30 pounds after the show. And now I can walk around as this comfortable, reasonable person. And I don't have to keep fighting for this aesthetic that I just immediately lost because I just fought for 16 weeks and lost it in 3 days.
Yeah. And it's very hard to get it back. You know, any level of condition, once you, especially natural to a certain degree, you know, both sides of the coin, but, you know, if you put on that weight, you're, of course, you're going to be in a hole, right? So your example earlier, or, you know, say 10 kilograms, 20 kilograms in a short space of time. You're not going to want to go to the gym because people have validated you that you're fucking shredded. No, you're not. You're not going to want to get naked, I'd imagine. You know, I'm talking from what I would assume. I'm not saying this is everyone, but you're probably not going to feel good naked. Probably not going to feel good in clothes. People at work are going to go, what the fuck has happened to you? You cannot control what you're eating. You're getting these like dopamine hits from the foods that you've wanted for this whole prep. And your energy and how you feel about yourself, that's going to affect if you want to train anyway. And then how do you get back from that? And I truly believe this is a coaching, the relationship. So yeah, it's client and coach. But the coach needs to understand the client before taking them through the prep. If there is food behaviors, there's things that need to be worked on, and why the fucking hell they're doing it. Why are we doing this? Why are we going into extremely low body fat? Start reversing people out in their mind in the, you know, what we'd say as the guidelines, what we're speaking about. I talk about the reverse out before the prep if I get the opportunity. This is what it's going to look like, you know.
As you should.
Yeah. And
yeah, get people fired up, get people ready. Like they need to understand that, like, once this is over, we have a plan.
Yeah.
So the work is not done after the 16 weeks and after you stepped off stage. I think the work I think there's more crucial work to be done when you're done bodybuilding. Like, we got to clean up the mess now.
Yeah, yeah. And also, if you've funneled a lot of shit into the prep, you gave that example of that guy earlier. I know a lot of people that will do this. You know, essentially, they've been through something traumatic, or they're not in a good spot in life, so they do a prep. I've done it myself, for sure. And then off the back of the show, when your hormones are all, you know, tanked and everything's all over the gaff, you know, where do you then go if you haven't got someone you can talk to, or your coaches, you're at a level where you've got that vulnerability and you've been honest with them? You know, it's like, and then people will switch coach because, oh, you know, I don't know what to do. Or people will run out of money and they say, I can't afford my coach anymore. Again, if you're taking someone on for a prep, if any coaches are listening, ask them to sign up for a guaranteed at least 6 weeks after the show. Tell them this is how much it's going to cost. Because would you know that as a first timer? Would you know, okay, after the show, I need a coach? But that's where it's exciting. Like you said, that rebound of like, bloody hell, I feel quite good now. And that gets better. It keeps getting better. And you feel so much better as you reverse out and go into your growth phase. But the growth phase doesn't start until you've done that reverse out. And that can take a long time, particularly with stimulant use, a lot of cardio and things like this. But it's our job as coaches to get people excited for that. I'm sure you'll agree.
I mean, that's, to me, exciting my clients about the mundane work, the everyday boring stuff, is what I like to do the most. Because once you start getting, because at the end of the day, whether it's physique enhancement for the gen population, whether it's for bodybuilding, if you can't get excited about the boring stuff that goes into this process, then you shouldn't even start to begin with, because it's going to be boring. Like life, like I always tell people, life is not lived in the peaks and the valleys. Right? Like life is not lived up here. Like it's not always going to be vacation, and it's not always going to be death, right? It's going to be somewhere in between, and somewhere in between is pretty boring. So you have to be able to accept boring. You have to be able to thrive and find pleasure in the everyday boring stuff that you have to do. Weighing your food, measuring your food, prepping your food, going to the gym, going to bed at 9, waking up early, repeating it over and over and over and over and over again. And then every once in a while, it's exciting. Every once in a while, it's a photo shoot. Every once in a while, it's a vacation, but it's not the common thing that happens.
And it isn't just going to make that magically improve. If anything, it's going to make it worse, right? It's like the PED world has been a band-aid that has helped a lot of people look really cool for a short period of time and then completely fuck them on the back end, right? So like, how many coaches do you know that like just throw drugs at people and then don't really have a true understanding of how to handle nutrition and training for that client? And then that client ends up in a position where we're now having to deal with fixing their health markers because this dumbass over here just threw drugs and said more drugs, more drugs, more drugs. This will make you better when you don't have the foundation of the house over here with your nutrition and training and so on.
Yeah, it genuinely, like, it actually hurts me when I get listeners reach out, and particularly around, you know, dosages, mainly females that would, you know, message off the back of listening to a podcast. Now, I've spoken about things like 𝗂𝗏, you know, what the dosage would be. And Dynamite was the first person that said it on the pod. He was like, you can start with like 2.55, see what the result is. And then, you know, potentially there's wiggle room to increase that. And there was people reaching out saying, oh, my coach just told me to do, you know, from being natty, nothing else, no other compounds, to 25 per day of 𝗂𝗏. And I'm thinking, and then also saying, there's not really any side effects to that. And I'm literally like, what the fuck is going on here? Do you know what I'm saying?
So do you know 𝘀𝗶𝗺𝗃?
I've seen on Instagram.
Yeah, so Corey's a friend. I actually got to meet her at Nationals the other week, so that was really cool. We've chatted a lot on Instagram. She made a post the other day that said just because there was an absence of side effects with things that you've used in the past does not mean that that is the way to go, right? It's like a lot of times when we start looking at the side effects of like the enhancement side of things, it is a compounding effect. It is something that it's not something that like you're not going to take a shot of testosterone and die. Like you're not just going to you're not going to take a shot of testosterone and you're going to have a heart attack. That's not how this works. It is a compounded effect over years and years because of abuse of your system that comes together, because usually those people who are going that crazy to the extent where they are getting life risking side effects, it's because they've probably been abusing the drugs. They've probably also been abusing their stomach. They've probably also been abusing their sleep. They've probably also been abusing recreational drugs to mask dumb shit that they've got made for themselves, right? So it's like, it's this mixing pot of just dumb that leads to these bigger issues that people pass on. And like, again, there are outliers where it's like, yes, there are going to be some people who like just take a little bit of things and get some they get kidney failure, right? Where it's like, hey, look, that was in your cards. Like you were probably going to have kidney failure to begin with. You just sped it way the fuck up. So it's like, those things are going to happen. But for the most part, when we see these like crazy things of like, oh, this kid died at 28, it's like, okay, well, what was he doing? Like, how many things was he doing to compound that effect of this thing?
Yeah, and when you feed that into longevity, you know, yes, okay, you're willing to put your life on the line. That reminds me of Ali G, putting the life on the line for a prep. And, you know, everything is centered around that. And potentially, like you say, stimulant use is going in. You may be doing an exposure to something like 𝗂𝗏 or whatever that may be. That titrates up. You're leaning on things like caffeine more. Sleep is affected. All of those things. And then in your example earlier of, okay, I'll have 4 weeks as a health phase, and then I'll push up. So I liken it to psychologically, you know what you're doing. So you're like, yeah, this is sick, you know, loving it, now I'm growing, whatever. Your body is going, what the fuck is going on? You know, even I always, you know, talk to Matt, my other half, about it. In a peak, you know, if you're in the assisted realms, some of the stuff you're using for the peak alone, I had that recollection of like, my body's going through some extreme shit right here just to get me on stage.
Yeah, most definitely. And like, even if we don't use diuretics and things like that for peaking and whatnot,
start to understand it, educate yourself, and understand also which is quite hard for competitors when they're in a prep to hear and fully take on board. But if you're listening now and you're in a prep, guys, you cannot keep prepping forever. You cannot stay lean forever. You've heard on the episode with Aram, 4 weeks to the beach, what will happen if you try and do that, and also with the episode with Nick. You've heard me speak on this podcast many, many times and share on my social media what can happen if you try and stay lean for longer periods of time. There's a big, big difference, guys, between dieting and a contest prep. And if we find ourselves self-restricting and trying to stay lean, the physiological impacts that can happen and the mental health impacts that can happen are phenomenal, because it can completely construct your life and your every waking moment. And if you are self-restricting, physiologically, your body is not happy. And if we now break down the different ways of trying to combat each of those methods of self-restriction I've spoken about, and then I'm going to talk about other ways that you may be self-restricting, but not actually realizing that it's a method of self-restriction. So we're going to start from the top. My first example, and what most people would assume self-restriction is, not eating the food that you've been assigned on your plan, or the appropriate amount of calories that are appropriate to your phase outside of a diet. I say that, but I have in the past tried to eat less calories and self-restrict in an extreme prep also. So this, I don't want to miss that out. This is also appropriate to self-restricting in a prep. Now, that may seem wild to some people listening. Why would you eat less in an extreme deficit already? But guys, let's face it. If you're of the same mindset of me, that you will do whatever it takes to get lean, to get to stage condition, you will literally do whatever it takes. And that can be at detriment to yourself. This can also be at detriment to your stage performance and your stage physique. So the reason I want to start with that is, it is not clever to go against what your coach is telling you. Now, I understand why you do it. Like I say, I've done it. I've tried to cut out, you know, even silly things of, you know, at one point, Tom said, if you want to, you can have 2 monsters a day. So with my analytical, 𝗏𝗏𝗀 mind, I know that monsters have 11 calories in them, the ones that I was having. So what can I do there? He says I can have 2, but I'll hang it out, even if my energy is in the gutter, and I would have 1. So it seems like a silly example, but if you guys are listening and you relate to this, I feel you, I understand you, I see this. And this is, you know, my reason I do these solo episodes and I do the podcast in general. It's to give you a voice. You are not alone if you have these thought processes. You are not alone. And it may feel like you're alone. I've been there also. And I used to listen to podcasts hoping to have comfort, to find support, to build community. And I didn't feel that. I felt like at times people were much more advanced than me. They wouldn't talk about things like I'm talking today, trying to save 11 calories on a monster, right? But it is a thing when you are of this mindset. And if we don't talk about it, if I don't talk about it as your podcast host, I could be missing an opportunity to hopefully speak to you right now in your ears and say, when you are in a prep, if you find yourself wanting to restrict more, and that also goes for doing more steps, more cardio, the things that will accrue more of a deficit, if you do that, there's two examples here. If you do that and you don't tell your coach, you've got to remember, guys, your coach is basing changes on you saying that you're doing the plan that they've set. So if you're saying I'm doing X and you're not, and you're doing more, and you check in, your coach is going to prescribe what you need to do that following week or however often you check in, based on you saying what you've done in the plan that's been set.
You tell me, when you got started in this and you start finding out certain things, you said to yourself, oh yeah, but I'll never do that. But then you do it. And then the next thing is, I'll never do that. So my example was, for me, I'd never use insulin. I said that when I was young, but then you progress through and you start learning more, and then you become more experimental the deeper you get into it. It really is true in terms of bodybuilding. I think every drug is a gateway drug to the next thing. My current thing at the minute, I said, after listening to a podcast on DMP, I said, I never use DMP. I don't see the risk to reward ratio. And I hope I stand by that. At this point, I'd say I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want it to get to that point. I don't like the variable, but who knows? This is bodybuilding. Competitive nature, athlete mentality dictates that at the end of the day, when you've got a job to do, how our minds kind of work. And I can't speak for everyone, but people that I'm associated with, perhaps yourself, myself, you end up doing whatever's necessary to achieve the goal. It's quite crazy the way the mind works, where in a certain setting you will say you'll never do it, but when you're in that process and the wheels are turning, you will often go there.
Yeah, because I was exactly the same with insulin. I never thought, particularly as a female, I just didn't think it would really be something that I'd consider per se. And when I came off the back of my last prep, doing that assisted, and then my food went up pretty high for a female, I believe, you know, in the bikini realms. So carbs got up to 500, and my coach Tom was like, well, this is where we could deploy insulin. And I was like, what? Insulin for a bikini girl? And then the more you delve into it, it's like there is other bikini girls using it, and it's wild, because like yourself, I never thought it would even really be on the cards.
Yeah, it depends on the setting, doesn't it, and how it's presented to you on a plate. I mean, with insulin, you can be, it's often how competitors rationalize it in their own brain to do these things. And in that moment, I would guess that carbohydrates are sky high, and you're thinking of insulin as more of a prophylactic aid pancreas and doing its normal job. But in doing that, we totally disregard what could be on the other end of it. You know, that dependency, that the pancreas starts to sit back, the HbA1c levels come up and up, rising over the years. Especially things like when you're doing that, you're probably using growth hormone at the same time as well.
Yeah.
Then it's a cluster, but we're still kind of thinking, oh, but it can be a health aid, which it can be. But I think with anything there, it's devil is in the dosage.
Yeah, for sure. And we're talking about assisted realms, natty realms as well. You know, for me, competing naturally for many, many years, I dug myself into a hole because I was doing back-to-back prep. So even on the natural side, you know, people assume that it's just when you're assisted that you're, you know, risking things, but it's not, because when you're doing it natty, you know, hormonally, if you keep doing it, there is repercussions, and it's super important to get that awareness up. And people sometimes sort of skirt around it, if you know what I mean. Oh, well, you know, I've got to get to stage, doesn't matter till off the back of it. But I know myself, you know, 12 years of competing, got a lot of health issues that I'm addressing now, and it's a bit of pill to swallow. I wouldn't change it because I got a lot from it, but it's like, fuck, you know, I'm 34.
Yeah, this is a controversial opinion of mine, but I say bodybuilding, however you do it, it's not natural. Not in the way what we take, but in the way the ramifications can be on the body. With natural competing, you know, with taking PEDs alone as a female, you can force yourself into early menopause. You can become postmenopausal in all sorts of ways, but you can do it for natural bodybuilding as well in so many ways as well. Like, for example, I had, this is going on the male side of things, I had a client, Aram, classic physique, fantastic physique. Through prep this year, at the end of prep, his testosterone was, I think it was 0.1 nanomole per deciliter at the end of prep.
Yeah.
That is absolute, that wouldn't even, I believe that wouldn't even be in reference range for a female, or it would be low end, very low end.
Yeah.
Which, you know, with that, you're looking at knock-on effect, because when imbalances arise, the body is trying to reach homeostatic status, everything else is out of whack as well. So through that, you know, he's 20, I think he's 24 or 25, Aaron. So what are you then having to lead yourself to? It's, oh, well, I'm going to have to go to TRT now. I'm sure he won't mind me talking about this, because he's very open with his now switched to enhanced, which has gone to TRT, which now when he competes, is he going to compete at TRT in an enhanced field? Probably not. It's dosaging up from there. And now he's led himself into a gateway, which I was accepting of, because he has goals. And as coaches, all we can hope is that we do them and we guide these people as safe as possible. And they're not going off some of the advice in the internet and just going off their own back and making mistakes, because we don't like to see people make mistakes. But at the same time, it's via the competitive route that has led to this in the first place. So I think whether you're enhanced or natural, competitive bodybuilding, it's not going to be healthier doing it over and over again for years.
Yeah. And for sure, I certainly, when I speak to people, you know, on a consult or however it goes, when people talk about the prep, for me, because I guess there is that personal side to it where I'm like, you know, I've got a lot of things I'm addressing now, not only health wise, but relationship with food, body image, etc., which I'm working hard on and digging down on. And if someone comes to me saying, you know, I'd love to do what you do, it's a really serious conversation. And I think sometimes it could be taken in the wrong way, right? Like, you know, why are you warning me of all these things that can occur? But like you said exactly there, as coaches, we can only try and, you know, give as much information as possible if someone is going down this route. Now, bodybuilding can bring so many positives, but it does, particularly, you know, if you're going into a category where you've got to get skinned, it's not healthy. And when you're in it, you don't really realize it's like, you know, I'm getting all the striations are coming, you're doing something so incredible and you get hooked.
Yeah, that is generally the consensus amongst like people in our industry. A lot of us, some of us not come from an athletic background or competitive background in some shape, way, or form. So we are driven to win. It's human nature, isn't it? Is whether you're female or male, if you're of competitive nature, it's about that kind of, I'm going to say it's kind of hierarchy in a way. It's an alpha, you know, to be the best. Whether you're female or male, it's totally there. But there are some competitors, you know, who purposely will not push the boundaries and do come in softer and are able to accept it.
Don't tell me you're going to put all the effort in the world, because I don't like hearing it, because it's bullshit. Okay, because you don't know. You don't know if you're going to be able to put the effort in. I had a guy the other day who signed up, right? Young lad, like 20 years old, something like that. Great potential, great physique, good little future ahead of him, whatever. Damn, mate, I'm just willing to do whatever it takes. I'm so invested in my bodybuilding at the moment. 2 weeks in, gone. Nah, mate, it's too much for me. It's too much food. I just can't eat this much. Right. Bye. Like, everyone thinks, oh, I've got what it takes. I know I have. I can work super hard. I'm like, I don't care how fucking hard you work in the gym. That's that percentage of like the problem. That's a small percentage. I want, can you commit to the sleep schedule? Can you afford what you're going to need to take? Can you eat enough to get to the level of development that you're going to need to? Can you suffer when it comes to dieting so that you're actually going to be able to get peeled enough? Or are you just a gym rat bodybuilder who thinks that Olympia is a piece of piss to get to and pro cards are handed out like candy? Because they might be handed out more. They are not easy to get at. So now I go, look, what have you done with competing so far? And they're like, oh, I've done this, this, and this. And I'm like, how'd you do? I'm like, all right, let's focus on just winning this stuff first, all right? Let's focus on being one of the best in the UK. Once we've done that, we'll start talking about pro cards. I kind of broach it a bit more like that. I don't want to be a dick about it like anymore.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's the fundamentals, right? So you spoke about sleep, eating, etc. Like, people they can't tick the normal boxes because it's boring, but it's like, then you think you're just going to jump on PEDs and win the Olympia. It's fucking
crazy. Like, Tom must have the secret for how to get there. And I'm like, the secret is consistency. Yeah, I have some tricks, and yeah, I have some tricks of the trade to make things more comfortable. Yeah, I have some tricks that other people don't have that will be able to benefit you to a level of development that's going to help you, you know, get to where you need to get to. But I don't come around and shove the meals in your face. I don't come around and cook your meals. I don't call you every hour and go, come on, time to eat. Like, I don't, I'm that's not me. Like, you want to do it, do it. I'll tell you how to do it. If you can't do it, can't do it. Like, but I'll tell you how to get there. Whether or not you are able to get there is genetically dependent, but also like, have you actually got the ability to put the time in? Like the ability to put the time in at the dinner table, and have you got the ability to, make sure you're getting enough sleep? Are you partying every weekend, going out on the piss with your mates? Are you, like, are you able to afford bodybuilding? Like, are you working enough? Have you got a good enough job that it's, or are you just scraping together pennies? Because that's not how it's done. It's hard. It's an expensive sport.
Well, it is, and also, if you are going from amateur to pro league,
Yeah.
there is commonalities for sure with the fundamentals, etc.
Absolutely.
It becomes, a bit more relevant on so meal timings, macro splits, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, that movement from amateur up to pro development at a pro level, competing, like, one of the similarities. Well, it's all bodybuilding in general. It's all the same thing. But the psychology that I have seen from people who turn pro is robotic, but they don't go on about the fact that they're robotic. They don't constantly tell everyone, like, no, I'm never miss my meals, I love it, because it's so fucking normal for them to be putting in this much effort. Because effort to them is not this, like, it's natural. It just comes. Like, it's just like, they don't sit there and go, oh, I've got to eat another meal. I really can't be bothered for this one. I'll just leave it for now. I'll just have my next one. They go, okay, cool, meal. But there isn't even any conscious decision, no thought process, no nothing that goes on, that their brain is blank. It is simply a case of, it is time to eat and that is the time. Like, that's it. See, that's with food. With let's say, okay, here's a good example, because this will be a bit of shocking to people. Say I say to someone, I'm like, listen, man, I think we're going to need to increase your growth hormone or your primobolan dosage, right? That's a little bit more expensive. So, okay, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to afford that. I'm like, okay, what do you want to do then? And like, okay, well, let me pick up an extra shift. Let me look at what I can do in terms of some extra work or something. I'll go do some extra work with my dad on the weekend. He's got a job for me to do over at his place, so I'll go do that, and that should pay for the bottles that I need for this week or the extra. Yeah. Okay, are you sure? Yeah, no, I need to do that, so that's fine. That's the mindset of an amateur who wants to go pro, rather than, I can't do it, it's not possible, I can't afford it. It's, let me try and find a way. And I'll bridge that space if I'm able to do so. The space is just far too far, and that's that. Then I can't do it, and that's okay, but at least I'm trying to make my base on there somehow. It's a difference between that, and that sounds like I'm telling someone to take something that's too expensive. I'm not. What I'm doing is, I'm still being mindful about a budget, and I'm still being mindful about things as a coach. If there is genuinely something that I feel is going to be the difference between turning pro and not, you need to be able to go, I think I should be able to find a way to do that, rather than, if you can't, I'll go, safe man, we'll find another way, right? But I want you to, that gap, that's pro level thinking. It's like, this means everything to me thinking, rather than amateur thinking of, no, that's not possible.
Long before I fully accepted that I was trans, that I was already buying all kinds of books and doing all kinds of research. And the thing for me was, one of the things that kept me, I think, in denial longer was that I never saw any trans girls like myself. All the trans girls I saw were stereotypically feminine, were not athletic, very much never fit in at all, like in the male world growing up. And so, like I said, the fact that I was not only into sports, but really good at them, and then also, that I was really passionate about strength and putting on muscle and things like that, and that I was attracted to women, like those things, kept me in denial about actually being trans. Well, I like this, so I can't be trans. I do this, so I can't be trans, because I'd never seen anyone that was like me. And I still remember the moment that it hit me. I was reading a book by a woman named Donna Rose, and she was from Canada, and she was a college wrestler. And I remember at one point I'm reading the book, and she was talking about when she was in college and she was wrestling, and she was putting on a lot of muscle and lifting and everything. And then it just hit me, and now she's, transitioned and very, very happy. And but just there were so many parallels, and it just hit me all of a sudden. And I remember sitting there setting the book down and going, oh crap, you know, I really am trans. Like the fact that I like these things doesn't preclude that. Yeah. And, but yeah, I mean, it's so obvious looking back. There were so many things, like I said, between Halloween and like I never went to like homecoming. I never went to dances and stuff in high school because like prom, I never went to a prom because just the idea of it made me so uncomfortable and filled me with so much anxiety. Because yeah, I wanted to wear the prom dress. I wanted to be the one doing it, and I couldn't bear having to wear a tuxedo and, you know, and be with a girl and like wanting to be her so bad. So I just avoided all those things, and like, and sometimes girls would ask me to go to prom, and I would come up with some kind of excuse and, you know, why I didn't want to go and things like that. But yeah, but it was just so obvious. There were so many things growing up, and it's amazing that I was able to keep myself in denial as long as I did. But it was really a protective mechanism. It was really like keeping me safe, and so much of it was due to the, you know, the fear. But back then that wasn't even an option. Like had I showed up, had I been like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna wear a dress and I'm gonna get dolled up and I'm gonna go, I wouldn't have made it in the front doors of the school. I would have been expelled. I don't even know what would have happened, but it just wasn't even an option. That's not even something you could have entertained back then. And most likely I probably would have been attacked too. But and I certainly would have been ostracized from, you know, all my social circles at that point. You know, unfortunately, like sometimes I feel like, gosh, I was just born a few generations too soon. You know, had I been born, you know, 50 years later, you know, life would have been a lot easier. But I also feel fortunate that I was able to be one of the people that maybe helped a lot of other people that came after me to make things easier for them. So really, that's why I continue to talk to be open about this stuff, because I know there's still a ton of people out there that are afraid to be who they are and are still struggling with those things, and still exist environments where it's not okay to be trans. There's still a lot of places in the world where it's still very similar to how I grew up, or sometimes even worse, you know, where you still face extreme violence for just being different. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important to be open and honest about these things to help educate people.
Instagram showing us pictures of people with these, you know, veins in their six pack. It's not something that is sustainable. It's not an enjoyable place to be, certainly in terms of your general energy. I mean, your hormone levels will drop, testosterone, your sleep will suffer, your thyroid will be suppressed, your energy levels will decline, your hunger will be through the roof. You'll constantly be thinking about food. You know, I started competing in 1988. And so I've dieted down for bodybuilding competitions to single digit body fat, whatever that may be, 4, 5, 6%, whatever you want to call it. And I recall, you know, this is why I have so much empathy for people who are trying to lose weight, you know, whether they're obese or what have you, it doesn't matter, whether they're trying to get ready for a bodybuilding show or whether they're 100 pounds overweight. The feeling is the same, that overwhelming hunger, food noise, the, you know, inability to sleep and the stomach growling. And that really is the hurdle, the biggest hurdle. The number one reason that diets fail is because of that hormonal hunger signaling. It very well is. And some people have a greater genetic predisposition, and having more body fat also makes you more susceptible to things like leptin resistance, leptin being the satiety hormone. And people become resistant to that. And so they don't really feel the same satiety signals. They're hungry all the time. As you lose weight, your ghrelin starts pumping out, which is your hunger hormone. And this is why it's so difficult, why we have such a high recidivism, a failure rate, a weight regain problem. 50% within the first year, probably 70, 80% after 2 years, and north of 90+% after 3 years. If not gaining more weight back than you originally started with, because you lost a significant amount of muscle, and that causes an additional problem with your basal metabolic rate and your weight regain. So I'm very empathetic, because I remember going to bed at night dreaming about food. It's all I could think about. I would actually picture almost in 3D the pizza going through the pizza oven, and the pepperoni curling up at the edges, and the cheese boiling, and I was obsessed with it. And I was, you know, I'm a very disciplined individual, but it's not enough. Discipline, willpower is not a good strategy. You'll lose that battle every time. And mine was just, I had a short-term goal. It wasn't like I anticipated I'd have to feel this way forever, which is what the general population, you know, dad bods and soccer moms feel like. It's like, how long does this go on? I'm 100 pounds or 50 pounds away from where I want to be. I had a show in 10 weeks, you know, so I can grind it out, and I know I can gain the weight back later, whatever. But that's not any kind of life to live. And when you get on stage and when you're in that kind of condition, you're not fit. You couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag. You know, you can't do anything. You're just exhausted. And so I don't wish that upon anyone. And so it is very challenging. And you and I both work with a lot of Gen Pop. Probably the primary thing we do is help people with weight loss. You know, probably better than 90% of our clientele. I know I'm known for working with professional athletes, etc., but the vast majority, those guys don't pay, by the way. Just don't be confused. Yeah, they're just great for your resume, but they have 100 guys lined up right behind you that will do it for free. And you know, certainly I've had some real high-profile professional athletes who have compensated me, you know, very well. But for the most part, you know, those folks are good for your resume, and you feel a sense of accomplishment when you can help them achieve their goal. No question. Yeah. But it's the Gen Pop that need the most help, that have, you know, they're not the genetically predispositioned people. They're probably, you know, not the most disciplined or consistent with that particular pursuit. Yeah. Right? That's not their thing. This isn't something they do because they enjoy it. You know, they have careers and kids and everything else, and this whole weight loss thing is just a nuisance to them. And they need some guidance, but it's certainly not a priority of theirs necessarily, but for the fact that it makes them feel terrible, either, you know, emotionally or physically. And so, you know, it is challenging. And I hate the fact that I didn't get into physical therapy or chiropractic, because they've got a 95% success ratio, because the vast majority of pain resolves itself spontaneously in 4 to 6 weeks. So no matter what you do, you know, you can wave a candle over somebody and the vast majority of them will feel better in 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. Tongue in cheek, but and then we've got this horrendous success rate, and you know, this constant recidivism, and clients coming back and forth and going off the rails and regaining the weight, and it's frustrating. And then we've got, of course, social media, which is one of the biggest banes of our existence, is what I call the shiny object syndrome. And every other day there's some whack job telling people they have to completely cut out some macronutrient, or, you know, they have to do some outrageous training program, or, you know, and you're just like, no. And you're talking to desperate people, you know, and you know, it's like somebody with cancer telling them, oh, you don't need chemotherapy, you know, you just come on down and get my holistic treatment. And it's like, you know, I understand why guys like Layne Norton and others get so upset, because we're trying to help people, and there's folks out there giving just horrendous information and actually harming people.
Yeah, oh, I love that you've said that, because no one sort of organically said it on a podcast yet. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 years, and it's normally me that sort of says, you know, it's so detrimental to our community, because, you know, if you see a reel or whatever it is, this snippet of someone saying this is bad, and you maybe already have this food in your diet, or maybe you've overeaten and you're trying to get back on track, or you're doing something that they're sort of almost bashing, where does that leave the person with no education and feeling like a bag of shit? And then it's like, how does that person come back round? Or does it then lead to food pathologies, which feeds into, you know, that pressure that we get? And it's so unfair, Stan. It really upsets me.
I know. And you may have experienced the same thing. I've had clients come to my office and actually cry because they told me that the doctor they were going to, or whatever practitioner was going to help, refused to help them if they wouldn't go on their particular diet. In this case, and generally the case, is keto. Let me say this on the outset, that all diets work when they're strictly adhered to.